Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello, welcome to the Caiden Cowger Program, broadcasting from West Virginia. It is great to have you with us. So, on December 5th, 2010, at the age of 12, I began hosting this show. And today marks the 8th year of broadcasting. And I got to tell you, it's been an absolutely wonderful experience. And it's given me the opportunity to speak before the Vice President, meet the President. It's given me a wonderful opportunity to have amazing guests on this show. Like Ben Shapiro, Hunter Avallone, all you guys, love you. And it really has. It's been the opportunity of a lifetime. And most importantly, the most amazing part has been to be able to talk behind this microphone and present to you the issues that are near and dear to my heart and the solutions to solving the problems concerning this nation. So I hope to have your listenership for another 8 years. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for listening to this program. And it really does. It means a lot. Words can't express how grateful I am to continue to have this opportunity.
Oh, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary.
So anyway, guys, you have President George H.W. Bush that passed away here recently. And today they had the funeral service at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And, you know, I got to tell you, it amazed me. It actually didn't amaze me. I expected this. But as soon as he passed away, it wasn't focused on him. The news media was completely still focused on President Trump, and the story of the day was, is President Trump going to attend President George H.W. Bush's funeral? I mean, that was the story that all of the news agencies, essentially the tabloids, were running. And I'm just amazed at the hatred and disdain for President Trump. It even goes to the degree of completely ignoring the entire presidency of George Bush just to try to bring the focus back to Trump. President Donald J. Trump announces he will be attending the President George H.W. Bush funeral, making this a big headline story. I mean, it was just an absolute nightmare. I don't understand why the media is so upset. Actually, I do understand why the media is so obsessed. The reason why the media is so obsessed is because President Trump is completely destroying the utopia that Obama built for them. And they will even go to the degree of completely drawing focus to Trump after the death of a former United States president. That we're going to bring the focus to Trump. And then a big story was, why isn't President Trump leading the eulogy at George H.W. Bush's funeral? And then Jeb Bush had to come out and address that and said, well, the reason why is because we have a very unique circumstance in our family. We have another former president, President George W. Bush, my older brother. So that's the reason why George W. Bush led the eulogy at President George H.W. Bush's funeral. It's his dad. And his dad had a son that was president, so the son leads the funeral service. You know, but again, they try to make controversial stuff out of all this. And it was just completely ridiculous. But one of the things that they are doing with George H.W. Bush is that they are portraying him as being this absolute hero, complete American patriot, a decent, gentle person, a great American. That's what the media is portraying Bush as. But the thing is that all throughout his administration, and quite frankly with the whole Bush family, they have completely attempted to besmirch him, portray him as being the most horrific person, and now suddenly he is this absolute godsend that was just a gentle human being and a wonderful president. It's quite frankly sickening, because the reality of it is, and Michael Goodwin with the New York Post pointed this out in an excellent column, they absolutely love Republicans under the condition that they're dead. That's the only time that they like Republicans, is when they're dead. And what they're attempting to do with George H.W. Bush, with John McCain, and all of these other Republicans that have passed away, portray them as being these ideal Republican figures, but when they were in there, they tried to completely drag their name through the mud. Look at John McCain, for example. They're in the primaries. They call him the American Maverick, the political maverick. But then when he was the nominee, they portrayed him as being this out-of-touch old white guy that probably isn't going to live long enough to serve one term as president. Has medical records the size of the Grand Canyon. I mean, this is exactly the type of rhetoric that they were spewing when John McCain was running for president. Well, now that you have George H.W. Bush that has passed away, in addition to John McCain, they're portraying both of these figures at once they completely mired as being the idealistic Republican. They're portraying them as being the Republican standard. And why is it? To try to make Trump look bad. That's what all this is about, to make Trump look bad. That's what it's always about, to make Trump look bad. I mean, guys, if Mitt Romney would happen to croak sometime, and if Donald Trump is still president, they'd do the same exact stuff to him. They would say, oh, look at what a wonderful man Mitt Romney is. Look at what a wonderful leader, a wonderful Republican, a decent human being Mitt Romney is. And the thing about all that is that when Mitt Romney was running for president, what did they do to him? You saw this television ad running on all of the networks about how Mitt Romney gave this guy's wife cancer. Yeah, Mitt Romney, he gave my wife cancer, and she died, and it's Mitt Romney's fault. Vote for Barack Obama. That was an ad. That was a television ad. And, of course, all the networks ran with it. Mitt Romney, Mitt Romney, can you answer the question? Mitt Romney, why did you give that guy's wife cancer? And, it's just absolutely amazing to me. Absolutely astounding. Of course, Mitt Romney, being the absolute beta male that he is, didn't have great answers to this, to these accusations and everything. Well, I love all people, and I wouldn't want anyone to get cancer. Rather than, pulling a Trump and saying, how does that even work? How could I have possibly given this guy's wife cancer? Rather than just say, what a stupid question. What a stupid question that is. But you ask a lot of stupid questions. Rather than saying that, just, no, I don't want anyone to get cancer, and I really feel for that, guys. That stuff does not work. It's always self-defense with many of these establishment-type Republicans. But again, these are the idealistic Republicans for the Democrats, now that they're dead, that is. As was expressed by the New York Post, anyway. Now that they're dead, now they're idealistic Republicans. And why is it? Because they make Trump look bad. This is Michael Goodwin from the New York Post. He was a patriot, a hero, a gentle gentleman, and a great American. You can't pick up a newspaper or go near a television without hearing leftists gush with praise for the late President George H.W. Bush. Who knew they felt this way? And you're not mistaken if the outpouring of previously unknown affection for the first President Bush sounds familiar. That's because it's almost identical to the loving send-off the same suspects gave Senator John McCain after he died in August. It all just goes to show that the Democrats and their media handmaidens really do love Republicans when they're dead. All the more so if they were alive and they opposed President Trump. There were reports that both Bush and McCain voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. See? Good Republicans. McCain's feud went beyond the grave when it became known that he did not want Trump at his funeral. McCain got extra love for that final bit of, quite frankly, being a jerk. Pettiness is what Michael Goodwin called it. Paradoxically, Bush gets extra credit because he wanted Trump at his funeral, even though both gestures are seen as a rebuke to the current president. In this case, Bush is hailed for rising above the pettiness. Sure. There's another phony dimension in the media's praise for Bush and McCain in that both were said to emphasize a less toxic time in politics. While it's true that politics wasn't always as vicious as it is now, and the Democrats and Republicans actually socialized frequently, the mainstream media didn't share in that bipartisan bonhomie when it came to coverage. Of course, they completely besmirched the Republican and exalted the Democrat. That's the way it's always been. Even then, their bias tilted left, although their double standard has reached new depths in recent years. I believe the press corps' lapdog approach to Barack Obama and attack dog approach to Trump are part of why Americans have become so polarized. And that's exactly right. Exactly right. They don't report the news. They don't report unbiased information. It's always a left-tilted story. That's the way it's always been. Indeed, many Trump voters explain their support for him as a reaction to left-wing press bias and the failure of other Republicans to fight back the way that Trump does. The heydays of press hatred for Bush and McCain came during their presidential campaigns, long before they were saluted for their late-in-life stances against Trump. Bush 41 and McCain were declared unfit to be president. The New York Times, which endorsed a Republican for president in 1956, that was the last time they did that, backed the hapless Michael Dukakis over Bush in 1988. And Bush went on to win in a landslide, picking up more than 53% of the popular vote and 426 electoral votes. 4 years later, the paper endorsed Bill Clinton, repping Bush's economic management as exasperating. It accused him of stroking racial resentment, of going into radical extremes, and supporting right-to-life measures, and said that his capacity to govern has collapsed. When Bush nominated Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court in 1991, he and Thomas got the same kind of character smearing that Trump and Brett Kavanaugh got this year. Now in his coffin, Bush is a model of American greatness. So that is an absolutely amazing piece by Michael Goodwin of the New York Post. And he couldn't be any closer to the truth. This is exactly why the media is praising George H.W. Bush. It is to make Trump look bad. All of this is about Trump. Rush Limbaugh went on Fox News with Shannon Bream and also reiterated the same exact thing, that the media's respect for George H.W. Bush is completely and entirely phony. This is Rush Limbaugh on Fox News.
With some exceptions. We talked about those last night. But our next guest says the media never treated the president with this kind of civility when he was alive. Here to explain, Rush Limbaugh, host of The Rush Limbaugh Show. Great to have you with us tonight.
Hey, pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so last night we talked about a couple of headlines, including one from the AP that had to be, well, reworked, shall we say, and some others that had an immediate negative reaction to the death of President Bush 41. And now in these coming days, we see a lot of fawning and talking about how he was so great at bipartisanship. He was a different kind of Republican. What's that all about?
Well, it's phony. They never treated him this way when he was president. They were vicious to him, like they are vicious and partisan to every Republican. I think it's just a vehicle for them, Shannon, to be able to contrast what they think Trump is versus the way they're telling us Bush was. The thing is that they never treated George W. Bush this way, or George H.W. Bush, either one of them this way. They had just as much animus for Bush 41 and Bush 43 as they do Trump, for different reasons. But since the current objective is to get rid of Donald Trump, however they can do it, driving down public opinion or Mueller's report and impeachment, anything they can do to contrast Trump with what they say was the greatness and the way it ought to be.
And Rush is absolutely right. It is. It's completely phony. This is all fake, and it's just essentially to make Trump look bad. That's all that this is.
Fighting liberalism one lie at a time.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
All right, time to take off. Hey Siri, play Caiden Cowger.
Playing the Caiden Cowger Program podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
With Apple CarPlay, I can listen to my favorite podcast on my way to work. Subscribe to the Caiden Cowger Program podcast on iTunes and listen to the show on demand, day or night. It's great commentary, keeps me informed, and part of my daily routine. It's conservative talk on my schedule, and I don't miss a second of it. Also, be sure to tell your friends. Subscribe to the Caiden Cowger Program on iTunes today. Now, back to the show.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say
All right,
it.
ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So, I want to play an audio bit for you from the National Cathedral earlier today, and it's of President George W. Bush eulogizing his dad. And it was rather touching. It was, and he did a superb job at presenting all of the accomplishments of his father and what his dad meant to him. And it's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and play this for you. This is President George W. Bush earlier today at his dad's funeral. Go ahead.
I once heard it said of man that the idea is to die young as late as possible. At age 85, a favorite pastime of George H.W. Bush was firing up his boat, the Fidelity, and opening up the 300 horsepower engines to joyfully fly, across the Atlantic with the Secret Service boats straining to keep up. At age 90, George H.W. Bush parachuted out of an aircraft and landed on the grounds of St. Anne's by the Sea in Kennebunkport, Maine, the church where his mom was married and where he worshiped often. Mother liked to say he chose a location just in case the chute didn't open. In his 90s, he took great delight when his closest pal, James A. Baker, smuggled a bottle of Grey Goose vodka into his hospital room. Apparently, it paired well with the steak Baker had delivered from Morton's. To his very last days, Dad's life was instructive. As he aged, he taught us how to grow with dignity, humor, and kindness. And when the good Lord finally called, how to meet him with courage and with the joy of the promise of what lies ahead. One reason Dad knew how to die young is that he almost did it. Twice. When he was a teenager, a staph infection nearly took his life. A few years later, he was alone in the Pacific on a life raft, praying that his rescuers would find him before the enemy did. God answered those prayers. It turned out he had other plans for George H.W. Bush. For Dad's part, I think those brushes with death made him cherish the gift of life, and he vowed to live every day to the fullest. Dad was always busy, a man in constant motion, but never too busy to share his love of life with those around him. He taught us to love the outdoors. He loved watching dogs flush a covey. He loved landing the elusive striper. And once confined to a wheelchair, he seemed happiest sitting in his favorite perch on the back porch at Walker's Point, contemplating the majesty of the Atlantic. The horizons he saw were bright and hopeful. He was a genuinely optimistic man, and that optimism guided his children and made each of us believe that anything was possible. He continually broadened his horizons with daring decisions. He was a patriot. After high school, he put college on hold and became a Navy fighter pilot as World War II broke out. Like many of his generation, he never talked about his service until his time as a public figure forced his hand. We learned of the attack on Chichijima, the mission completed, the shoot-down. We learned of the death of his crewmates, whom he thought about throughout his entire life. And we learned of the rescue. And then another audacious decision. He moved his young family from the comforts of the East Coast to Odessa, Texas, He and Mom adjusted to their arid surroundings quickly. He was a tolerant man. After all, he was kind and neighborly to the women with whom he, Mom, and I shared a bathroom in our small duplex. Even after he learned their profession, ladies of the night. Dad could relate to people from all walks of life. He was an empathetic man. He valued character over pedigree, and he was no cynic. He looked for the good in each person, and he usually found it. Dad taught us that public service is noble and necessary, that one can serve with integrity and hold true to the important values like faith and family. He strongly believed that it was important to give back to the community and country in which one lived. He recognized that serving others enriched the giver's soul. To us, his was the brightest of 1,000 points of light. In victory, he shared credit. When he lost, he shouldered the blame. He accepted that failure is a part of living a full life, but taught us never to be defined by failure. He showed us how setbacks can strengthen. None of his disappointments could compare with one of life's greatest tragedies, the loss of a young child. Jeb and I were too young to remember the pain and agony he and Mom felt when our 3-year-old sister died. We only learned later that Dad, a man of quiet faith, prayed for her daily. He was sustained by the love of the Almighty and the real and enduring love of her mom. Dad always believed that one day he would hug his precious Robin again. He loved to laugh, especially at himself. He could tease and needle, but never out of malice. He placed great value on a good joke. That's why he chose Simpson to speak. On email, he had a circle of friends with whom he shared or received the latest jokes. His grading system for the quality of the joke was classic George Bush. The rare 7s and 8s were considered huge winners, most of them off color. George Bush knew how to be a true and loyal friend. He nurtured and honored his many friendships with a generous and giving soul. There exist thousands of handwritten notes encouraging or sympathizing or thanking his friends and acquaintances. He had an enormous capacity to give of himself. Many a person would tell you that Dad became a mentor and a father figure in their life. He listened and he consoled. He was their friend. I think of Don Rhodes, Taylor Blanton, Jim Nance, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and perhaps the unlikeliest of all, the man who defeated him, Bill Clinton. My siblings and I refer to the guys in this group as brothers from other mothers. He taught us that a day was not meant to be wasted. He played golf at a legendary pace. I always wondered why he insisted on speed golf. He was a good golfer. Well, here's my conclusion. He played fast so that he could move on to the next event, to enjoy the rest of the day, to expend his enormous energy, to live it all. He was born with just 2 settings: full throttle, then sleep. He taught us what it means to be a wonderful father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He was firm in his principles and supportive as we began to seek our own ways. He encouraged and comforted, but never steered. We tested his patience. I know I did. But he always responded with the great gift of unconditional love. Last Friday, when I was told he had minutes to live, I called him. The guy answered the phone, said I think he can hear you, but he hadn't said anything for most of the day. I said, Dad, I love you and you've been a wonderful father. And the last words he would ever say on earth were, "I love you too." To us, he was close to perfect, but not totally perfect. His short game was lousy. He wasn't exactly Fred Astaire on the dance floor. The man couldn't stomach vegetables, especially broccoli. And by the way, he passed these genetic defects along to us. Finally, every day of his 73 years of marriage, Dad taught us all what it means to be a great husband. He married his sweetheart. He adored her. He laughed and cried with her. He was dedicated to her totally. In his old age, Dad enjoyed watching police show reruns, the volume on high, all the while holding Mom's hand. After Mom died, Dad was strong, but all he really wanted to do was hold Mom's hand again. Of course, Dad taught me another special lesson. He showed me what it means to be a president who serves with integrity, leads with courage, and acts with love in his heart for the citizens of our country. When the history books are written, they will say that George H.W. Bush was a great president of the United States, a diplomat of unmatched skill, a commander-in-chief of formidable accomplishment, and a gentleman who executed the duties of his office with dignity and honor. In his inaugural address, the 41st President of the United States said this: "We cannot hope only to leave our children a bigger car, a bigger bank account. We must hope to give them a sense of what it means to be a loyal friend, a loving parent, a citizen who leaves his home, his neighborhood, and town better than he found it. What do we want the men and women who work with us to say when we are no longer there? That we were more driven to succeed than anyone around us, or that we stopped to ask if a sick child had gotten better and stayed a moment there to trade a word of friendship? Well, Dad, we're going to remember you for exactly that and much more. And we're going to miss you. Your decency, sincerity, and kind soul will stay with us forever. So through our tears, let us know the blessings of knowing and loving you, a great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have. And in our grief, let us smile knowing that Dad is hugging Robin and holding Mom's hand again."
So that was President George W. Bush at his father's funeral service, delivering the eulogy, and he did an absolutely great job. And yeah, I mean, and that's another thing too. When Barbara Bush passed away, a lot of people were saying, it's not going to be too far now. It's not going to be too long now. Because they were super close. And when Barbara passed away, I mean, that was like part of him passed away as well.
Some say he's the next Rush Limbaugh.
I tell you, this kid's got 90% of Rush's venom with only 10% of the biomass.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
With all the fake news spread by the lying mainstream media,
it's fake, phony, fake.
It can be hard to find the truth. That's why you should listen to the Caiden Cowger Program. You'll stay informed on current events and hear great conservative commentary you won't find anywhere else. Also, be sure to tell your friends. Subscribe to the Caiden Cowger Program on iTunes or Google Play Music. It's conservative talk on my schedule, and I don't miss a second of it. Thanks for listening. Now, back to the show.
Caiden Cowger.
Somebody had to say it.
So anyway, guys, I want you to hear President George W. Bush's eulogy for his dad, because that is the highlight of his father's legacy. And even George H.W. Bush did not like to use the term legacy. A reporter actually asked him that. What do you think your legacy will be? And he said, what do you mean legacy? I don't like to refer to it as legacy. You know, essentially it's one of those things where I did the best that I could do, and, you know, history will determine whether that was a good job or a bad job. And that was what George Bush conveyed in this entire message delivered at his dad's funeral. But anyway, I want you to listen to just how absolutely Trump-obsessed the media is. Even some of the anchors at Fox News. Chris Wallace at Fox News said that he was struck by how quickly President Trump spoiled the mood at George H.W. Bush's funeral. Go ahead and listen to this. This is from Fox News as the hearse arrived at the National Cathedral.
And Ed, your thoughts when you look at this front row and this moment in history for our country?
Well, this is history. When you look at that front row of these amazing Americans, and it's the greatness of our democracy, you have Jimmy Carter, who George H.W. Bush was part of a team with Ronald Reagan who defeated him. You had Hillary Clinton sitting a couple rows down from the man who just defeated her. You had Bill Clinton, obviously, who was elected. That's our modern history. Those are people who basically shared views, fought hard for their places in history, and obviously are here to honor one of the great men of our times. And I think to a certain extent, there are two people in that front row who actually won the popular vote. Al Gore and Mrs. Clinton didn't win the presidency. We have a very unique system, and I think to a certain extent, as this is the ultimate insider game, all the people that are there have been around American politics for a long time, and the president who sits on the final person to come in here, other than George H.W. Bush, is the ultimate outsider. So it's a very fascinating observation, and it's what makes our democracy so very unique and so wonderful.
Chris Wallace, your final thoughts before we get ready to listen in really for the whole service. We're not going to talk a lot at all through all of this as the hearse arrives at the cathedral.
Well, I have to say I was struck when President Trump and Melania Trump came to the front row that it was as if a chill had descended on that front row. You had seen a lot of kind of chatty talk between the Clintons and the Obamas, the Carters. But when Donald Trump sat down, the greeting that he was given by Barack Obama and Michelle Obama was about as cold, about as cool as it could have been. It seemed like they exchanged hello, morning, and that was it. And at that point, they all stopped talking to each other. And obviously, yes, I agree with Ed, this is the greatness of America, but there also is a reality, and there are some ill feelings among some of the people in the front row. And I have to say that where you usually have a president's club and even people that ran against and maybe one beat the other, that doesn't seem to have been extended to President Trump when you see them sitting in that front row.
Although I will say...
So that was Chris Wallace just completely spoiling the whole mood of that little commentary piece, saying, look at how Trump was just cold-shouldered by all of the other presidents. Well, no kidding. They're all Democrats in the front row except Trump. You had President Bill Clinton. You had President Obama. You had President Jimmy Carter. Trump was the only Republican in the front row. So, of course, President Obama, President Clinton, President Carter are all kicks and giggles until Trump walks in. They're all Democrats. So, whatever. That was the commentary given by the wonderful and excellent and His Majesty himself, Chris Wallace, at Fox News, really detailing the contempt for Donald Trump at the funeral of George H.W. Bush. Because we all know it's all about Trump, and Trump completely spoiled the mood. How dare Trump for walking in there and spoiling the mood of all this? Just an absolute joke. Anyway, guys, so that was what happened earlier today. By the way, you want to hear something really twisted? Moving on, this is separate from everything that we've been talking about. But over in the Illinois Capitol Rotunda, there at the State Building, Apparently, they have decided to display a satanic sculpture and installed it at the Illinois State House just in time for the holidays, according to NPR. Listen to this. In the Illinois Capitol Rotunda this month, several traditions are being celebrated. There's a nativity scene for Christmas, a menorah for Hanukkah, and then something a little different. An arm holding an apple, with a snake coiled around it. It's a gift from the Chicago branch of the Satanic Temple, called Snaketivity. The work also has a sign that reads, "Knowledge is the greatest gift." Nearby stands a sign in which the state offers a civics lesson and explains it didn't have much of a choice. The state of Illinois is required by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution to allow temporary public displays in the state capitol so long as these displays are not paid for by taxpayer dollars. Because the first floor of the Capitol Rotunda is a public place, state officials cannot legally censor the content of speech or displays. The United States Supreme Court has held that public officials may legally impose reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions regarding displays and speeches, but no regulation can be based on the content of the speech. Well, that's really nice. Illinois State Secretary of State spokesman Dave Drunker told the State Journal Record that the temple has the same rights as other religious organizations. This recognizes that. The Satanic Temple calls itself a non-theistic organization on its application to install the display. So if it's a non-theistic organization, then it's not a religious organization. Religion is theism. So if this is non-theistic, then how is this considered to be a religious expression? In a GoFundMe campaign to raise $1,500 for the display, the group explains its mission. The Satanic Temple, Chicago, will no longer allow one religious perspective to dominate the discourse in the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda during the holiday season. Please consider what you may do to help us bring Satan to Springfield. The group has installed similar displays in other states in recent years. A more snake-prominent version of the display has been part of a holiday scene on the lawn of the Michigan Capitol. Outside the Arkansas State Capitol in August, the temple presented a statue of a goat-headed creature named Baphomet, flanked by two children looking up at him, to protest a display of the Ten Commandments. Despite the name, many of the Satanic Temple's activities demonstrate a particular concern for fighting, or at least revealing, the influence of religion in public life. And satanic sculptures have so far been an effective legal strategy for making its case. So see, there you go. So their number one goal is to try to drive Christianity completely out of the State House. That's exactly what they're attempting to do, or any acknowledgement of God whatsoever. But the question that I have is that we have freedom of religion, not freedom from religion in this country. Although it would signify both of those, they have essentially attempted to create an entire belief system behind atheism to where they essentially, it has become a religion, however they don't call it a religion. So if it's not a religion, then why do they expect to have the same acknowledgement as a religious belief? Because they themselves completely declare that they are non-religious. So what it really amounts to is that it's not that they are expressing their unique religious belief, they are expressing hostility towards religion. That's really what this is.
Caiden Cowger. Keeping America straight.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to today's show. I want to tell you another great way that you can listen to this podcast. You can do that by downloading the iHeartRadio app from the iTunes App Store or Google Play. You can just search my name, Caiden Cowger, and then listen to the show. You'll gain access to great conservative content, insightful commentary, and you'll stay up to date on the nation's latest news. So what are you waiting for? Download the iHeartRadio app today. Thanks so much again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Caiden Cowger. Somebody had to say it.
Okay, so understand this. The Church of Satan over in Illinois is saying that they are a non-theistic organization. Well, according to the First Amendment, Freedom of Religion Clause, the First Amendment says that we have freedom of religion, right? Well, what's freedom of religion? Freedom of religion is the freedom to believe in a theistic belief. You can believe in Christianity, you can believe in Judaism, you can believe in even Islam, you can believe in anything that you want to, Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever. Okay? Theism. Well, if the Church of Satan is a non-theistic organization by their own identification, then that would mean that it's not a religious belief, because it is a non-theistic type of value set. So here's the deal. What this is in its entire actuality, and it can't be denied, is that it's expressing hostility towards religion. Now, here's the thing. How many of these state houses do anything for, I don't know, say Halloween? That would be intriguing to know. I'm sure there's at least one state house in the United States that has some sort of Halloween display. Well, if that's the case, then I guess that we can go and we can protest that, because many would consider Halloween to be rather satanic, since it's exalting devils and demons and warlocks and witches and all this other stuff. And a lot of the imagery that comes out of Halloween has direct links to witchcraft. So perhaps we need to start protesting that and creating Christian displays and start trolling on them, because that's all that this is. So in reality, this is an expression of hostility of religion. But with them identifying as a non-theistic type of thing, organization, with them being non-theistic, I don't understand why they allow hostility to be expressed towards religion. Give them another date. Let them have their statue at the State House at another date. Doesn't have to be the same time as the Christians and as the Jewish people. So, again, this is just so absolutely ridiculous. But, again, it goes to show you just how corrupt America's society has become with regards to its embracement and complete immersion of secularism. You think that this would have been acceptable back in the 1930s, the 1950s, the 1980s even? Absolutely not. But nowadays it's allowed. That just goes to show you how corrupt the country's become when it comes to societal function. So, anyway, guys, in addition to that, you have Joe Biden that's out there. He gave his biggest 2020 signal to date, and he said that I think that I'm the most qualified person in the country to be president. So that's Joe Biden. It's according to the Daily Wire by Paul Boyce. Former Vice President Joe Biden is leaving little room for doubt on whether or not he plans to run for president in 2020. According to him, he's the most qualified person in the country for the job. Speaking before a crowd at the University of Montana on Wednesday to promote his latest book, Promise Me, Dad, the former vice president put himself at the top of the list for those who best suited to run against Trump in 2020. I think I'm the most qualified person for the country to be president, Biden said. The issues that we face as a country today are the issues that I've worked on my whole life, the plight of the middle class and foreign policy. So there you go. But my family and I needed to decide as a unit whether we're ready. We do everything as a family. If elected, the 76-year-old Biden would be the oldest president to be ushered into his first term by the American people. So there you go. Biden is practically announcing that he's running for president. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you for listening to us. For more information on the Caiden Cowger Program, go to CaidenCowgerProgram.com. And for the latest news exposing the left, go to CowgerNation.com. Thank you so much. May God bless you, and to another 8 years.